Good evening. Let's try that again. Good evening. All right. Okay, so yeah, for the sake of Leanne's class, Faith. And I'm very excited to have our guest tonight to talk to us about how they're the most ethical people you will ever meet. And they're going to introduce themselves, and along with each introduction, each of them will tell us a little bit about how they got to where they are as far as their careers. How did you get to be doing the work you're doing now? What was your journey towards that? Okay? So because I'm a feminist, we go ladies first.
I knew this was coming. So my name is Brenda Johnson, and I work for a company called Razor Consulting. Has anybody heard of Razor Consulting? How have you heard of Razor? Okay. Oh, he's your cousin. Perfect. So they are a technology consulting firm, and I work in the business. I am a program manager, as well as I assist and support in HR and talent management. So I started my career, well, I went to MSUM, and I graduated with a major in exercise science, physical education. So still in the people industry, but I am, it's different in HR than maybe working in a gym, so different journey. After college, I worked for a vendor out at Microsoft, and I started learning the business. I started as a customer service agent, taking phone calls and assisting partners and customers of Microsoft, and I worked into leadership roles, and during that course of time, we did not have HR on site. So anytime that there was anything to do with people, I was nominated or I volunteered to take on those tasks. So that's really how I started to discover my passion and love for people in HR. I led large teams. I did training and development, did recruitment. And then my husband and I, aka Dan, we relocated to Omaha, Nebraska, and I stayed in technology, and I was a client relationship manager. So took a little bit of a breather, but got to learn a different part of the business still in technology. And when we relocated back, I worked for a staffing agency as the branch manager. We supported a lot of different clients in helping them. We were their HR team, an extension of their HR team. So we helped them staff any open positions that they had, as well as those individuals were our employees. So we had over 100 employees that we managed across various industries. And then, the journey continues just working in HR. I am the president-elect of the Fargo-Moorhead Human Resources Association and member of the Chamber leadership, and I think that's where I'm at.
Okay. Dan?
As Brenda mentioned, Brenda's my beautiful wife, and I was asked to speak here tonight by Leanne. So ultimately, just kind of going back, how did I get to where I am today, right? That's the question. So ultimately, I finished up college. I had an internship while I was in college. It was a full-time, 40-hour-a-week internship for the last 2 years, junior, senior. Worked full-time at a very flexible internship. And ultimately what that got me was a little bit ahead of the game. I didn't know it at the time. I thought that it would make a lot of sense to have some experience before I graduated college. And it worked out pretty good. What I got was one of the very few times that Microsoft had actually hired somebody out of college to do the type of accounting that I was able to do. And ultimately, we didn't want to move to Minneapolis. We wanted to stay in town. We wanted to stay in Fargo. And so the company that I was with as an intern, Cargill, here, they were here in town, didn't have the type of accounting role that I needed. And obviously they did in Minneapolis, but we didn't want to move there, so I opted for Microsoft as a postgraduate employer. And so when I got there, I started as an accountant on the balance sheet, reconciling accounts, reconciling all these liabilities and assets and all these, just kind of doing the balance sheet work like accountants do when they get out of college. And I was asked to work with the divestitures, acquisitions, and ventures accounting team, which was a tremendous opportunity to integrate acquisitions that Microsoft had made. Yahoo at the time was part of it. There's a very long list, Jellyfish. There's all these odd technology names that they would go out and purchase, and we'd sit there and kind of do the accounting for it. It was a time of my life. I loved the job. I worked with really smart people. I was able to kind of polish my career, polish how to speak to people, polish how to get things done, polish how to Microsoft is a really cool place to learn that, no matter how smart you are, no matter how smart you think you are, there's always something out there that'll humble you in a big way. But at the same time, those people, one of the most memorable moments at Microsoft was that I'd walked into the room and we'd gone through a problem, and it was something that just perplexed me, and somebody just walked me through it. They did a very good job of explaining it, teaching me how to deal with it in the future. And I looked at that person. I said, you're very intelligent. You're very fun to listen to. And she looked at me and she said, we're all intelligent. You're intelligent, or you wouldn't be here. And I think that was something that really kind of reflected very well on me. And Microsoft was at the time was a very incredible culture, an incredible place to kind of grow up, I guess is how I put it. I don't know if that's the best vernacular or not, but moving on from Microsoft, I was able to, through a mutual friend of ours, was able to obtain a role with a local Discovery Benefits here in town as a controller. Given some experience that I had at Microsoft, doing line of business financial statements, breaking out, at the time they called it online account reporting, some accounting terms some ways to report financial data, and they knew I had that experience. They knew they needed that at Discovery Benefits, and so I kind of got lucky. Ended up as the controller of Discovery Benefits, and kind of went through the point at the time. The company was at a point when accounting was something that wound up in the corner of somebody's desk. Nobody took care of it. They were worried about the business, the important thing. They were worried about taking care of the customer, making sure that all client accounts were right, accurate, etc. And so I kind of was brought on at the same time as the chief financial officer who's there today, and we'd kind of went through what we'd call a transition, where we transitioned from kind of not necessarily generally accepted accounting principles. I'm kind of saying that lightly. It's a joke to the accountants in the room that we did not follow the rules at that time. We brought the accounting department up to the point where we published generally accepted accounting principles, financial statements, I think about a year and a half later. And something very proud of, an experience that's something, it took an extreme amount of work, and at times I'd ask myself why I did it. Why am I here? Why am I continuing to go through this? But about 9 months in, you started to make a lot of sense, and I was glad that I stuck it out, and we were able to accomplish a great deal. At that time, we moved to Omaha, and I had a couple of options. One of them was to work for a very typical firm, very large technology company. In fact, it was the same one Brenda worked at when she was in Omaha. No relation in people or anything, but there was another opportunity that I had with a small publicly traded company that had lost. The business cycle was complete. They'd manufactured 35 millimeter movie projectors, and those 35 millimeter movie projectors, they're these great big cast iron statues that sit in the back of a movie theater. They're extinct, and no. like dinosaurs. Nobody wants them anymore. But the company had a great deal of cash. It had a great deal of a great client list. There's all kinds of other platforms that they could run out and push into these movie theaters. They had a ready-made business. They just didn't have. They knew what they were going to do. They had this way of they can sell Samsung movie projectors. They can install them, maintain them, etc. And so the business this is a big change, right? So it was a big manufacturing company. Day one, we had to go in. I sat in a room with the chief financial officer, the chief operating officer, and spec'd out the company. We had to lay off a whole bunch of welders, long-term employees of the company. We had to go through that was something that really kind of really wasn't easy. It was something that it needed to be done, otherwise the company would not have survived. That's we'll get into that a little bit later. But from there, we kind of had to build this nationwide service company. We served I can't remember what the number of theaters were, but virtually almost all of them. It was Ballantine Strong. Any of you that have worked in a movie theater would know the name of the company. So that was kind of a business development. It was a business development role. It was something that we spoke, every single day. How are we going to do this? What are we going to do? The street's pushing us for earnings per share. We don't have any more 35 millimeter movie projectors that we can manufacture to get earnings per share. We got to find other ways to do it. We got to do it quick. The street does not like a down quarter, as everybody would, as you'll soon find out, or you already know. That's the street is very serious about earnings, and so it was a trick. We kind of had to build out financial models, figure out what we can do to add in businesses, to layer in businesses. You draw on experiences of hundreds of people. It certainly wasn't me and two other people. You figure out ways to build out a network operations center, get that printing revenue as soon as possible. It was a really good experience. And I moved back to Fargo. I went to go and worked for Theraldson Hospitality, changed its name to TMI Hospitality. Theraldson originally converted his original portfolio to an ESOP, and that became TMI Hospitality. I went to go to work for that company, worked with them through a sale to Starwood Capital. I worked with them through a sale when they converted it to a REIT, and then they sold that REIT to China Life Insurance Group. And when they sold it to China Life Insurance Group, they had begun a sale to another party. And at that point in time, the opportunity with where I work now is the Ann Carlson Center. I'm the chief financial officer. The opportunity, I had a couple of opportunities that came up. One of them was kind of a similar role. It was a chief financial officer role in a hospitality company, and it was another. And then there was Ann Carlson Center. It was something that came up that it was. I think there's a certain amount of, to get where I am today, I guess, to land the plane here for you guys, is that there's a certain amount of knowing people and networking and getting this. And my wife is very good about this. If it was up to me, I would sit in my basement and I would watch football, and I would watch ESPN all day. I might even fire up a PlayStation. Just kind of that's kind of my thing. And Brenda's out there. She gets in front of people, and it's been a blessing in a lot of ways for me to see kind of that helps, and knowing people helps. And if something goes wrong, you've got ways to navigate. If you just knowing a lot of people, it's been kind of neat to see how Brenda's kind of put that together. And so there's a component of knowing people. There's also a component of Brenda might be able to get me an interview, but at the end of the day, I've got to be able to actually execute the role that you're interviewing for. And that's probably the big thing is starting with the balance sheet, walking through an accounting, walking through the P&L, becoming an analyst at Microsoft, being a business development analyst out in Omaha, learning treasury and doing it in a big way at TMI, really kind of rounding out the depth and breadth of finance. And I don't think at any point in time in that schematic that I could have done what I'm doing today. One thing that I would say is that there are days where something comes up that are really complicated, and I think rounding out the depth and breadth of those categories or those experiences certainly help with that. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Before we hear Dustin, I'm just going to point out that Dan kind of answered several questions. He told us how he got where he is, but he also kind of touched on how you've set yourself apart by learning all these different skills. So you're not just an accountant, that you've got this business development thing, you've learned how to network, she's drawn you out of your shell and evidently has been very successful. I just wanted to point that out. Dustin.
It's true.
We good? There we go. All right. My name is Dustin Sobolik. I work for Heartland Trust Company. I'm an investment officer and portfolio manager there. How did I get the position that I'm in now? Failing upwards. So I graduated with a degree in political science and history from MSUM just down the road. I did not know what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to go to law school. I promptly dropped out after about 3 days, so that didn't work out too well. So after I dropped out, moved back home, I temped at Microsoft actually for a short period of time. And then I worked as a legal assistant to see, well, maybe this is actually for me. It turns out reading documents for 6 hours a day is not the most fun thing to do. And then I ended up temping at a financial office. And I was working for a financial advisor, and I saw what they did on a daily basis, and I said, well, I think I could do this. So I went out, got a job, and took what's called a Series 6 license and a Series 63 license exams, which are basically investment licenses. A lot of starting investment positions are just straight commission. So what you do is you're put through about a week of training, and then you make about 30 to 40 phone calls a day for, in my case, about a year and a half. So I spent a lot of time networking. I spent a lot of time just sitting around making phone calls and then having about 15 to 20 meetings a week. And that equated to about 60 to 80 hours in terms of a work week for my first, I would say, 4 months or so. I spent a lot of time in western North Dakota, driving back and forth. I did a whole route between Bismarck, Dickinson, over to Sidney, Montana, through Watford City and Williston on the way back, and then Minot. But it's all commission. And to kind of tie this into more of an ethical context, when you're just doing things based on commissions, you're probably not helping people make the best financial decisions, because you're not acting in what's called a fiduciary capacity, which means you're acting solely in the best interest of your clients. And that's actually, I still think that isn't a law in the financial services industry. They put it on hold recently. We'll see if it comes back around. So after a year and a half of that, I worked at what's called a registered investment advisor. The slang term in the industry is just called an RIA. And in that, I work in a fiduciary capacity. You're basically giving advice to clients, and then you're charging them a fee to manage their money. I did that for another couple of years, and then the ownership group got in litigation with each other. And I said, I'm not sticking around for this. And then I ended up at Heartland Trust Company. Originally, I was in a financial planning role, and then I did some investment management on the side. Now I do about 80% investment management, so I do the portfolios for the entire company, and then I have a handful of my own clients. And that is really where I'm at right now.
How did doing political science prepare you for that career move?
Well, I think the news intake certainly helped a lot. If you read any sort of news, for several hours a day. Right now, I have Bloomberg blaring in my ear for about 6 hours a day. It certainly helps. You want to stay cognizant of current events because it's going to affect markets. So that helps gauging geopolitical risk. It's also really good to have good interpersonal skills, be a decent public speaker, and I think that really helped groom me for that in some aspects.
And so, to get where you are, how have you set yourself apart from other financial analysts and wealth managers?
I think one component of that is A, not working on commission. That's still a big trend in the industry. And B, just going above and beyond for clients. So working extra hours, being available for them, getting back via email extremely quickly, just providing generally good service, and then trying to be ahead of the game in terms of the markets as much as you can.
So for the three of you, and we'll start on this end and then go that way. In this, your career experiences, what's been the most ethically complex situation you have faced, and how did you deal with it? You want to start, or you want us to go to Brenda first?
We can go either. All right, I'll start. The most ethically complex situation, probably quitting after a year and a half. You know, as I alluded to earlier, working on commission, you're not really helping people make great financial decisions. So you have different products, and you get certain commissions on each type of product you sell. So for life insurance, I would get 80% of what's called the first year premium as my commission. So if I sold $10,000 worth of life insurance, I would get $8,000, and you would earn that in a handful of meetings, but it would take you quite a while to get there. You would have annuities, other insurance products, generally speaking, and you would earn very large commissions on them. And your objective was just to do as much volume as possible in this. But you're not helping people make good financial choices. You're just trying to make money. So your entire kind of self-worth is equated to how this is going to go. And after a while, it just felt a little reprehensible to me.
Okay. All right.
You know, mine's pretty simple. I'm an accountant, and I think one of the primary objectives of an accountant is to recognize the truth, right? And so, management bonus objectives, management bonuses, you know, these things that are in place to incentivize folks like Dustin here, ultimately can cause issues with the way that people recognize things, right? And so, at one point or another, there's some disparity between how they may want it to get recognized and it gets recognized. And ultimately, one of the things that they'll do, hey, can you adjust this so that I can get to my goal this year, or you need to move that over here so that it doesn't hit my P&L, or that kind of thing. It's a very, very common. It happens quite a bit. There's also other issues with the recognition of expenses, or in accounting, it's very simple. There's certain laws and there's certain laws that you have to follow. There's certain regulations you have to follow. For instance, one of the best examples of this would be that in Microsoft we had some marketing folks that really wanted to sell a certain amount of Windows 7, right? It was, if they hit this target, they would make their management bonus objective. And if the actual recognition of the expense and the revenue, right? So you sell these many units, you're going to get this much revenue. Well, there's a mixture of units, so it kind of complicates things. And then there's this rebate that goes into it. But if you recognize that rebate as expense, it makes their revenue line look better. And so they come to you and they say, hey, just recognize some of this rebate. This is a complicated rebate. Push that down to expense. Well, at the end of the day, you could have something as complex as a Securities and Exchange Commission cease and desist order telling you, do not do this. You will go to jail. It's not necessarily that complex, but ultimately, you've got all kinds of opportunity to fleece, to kind of misrepresent something, and people are going to try to convince you to do so, and you've got to have the righteousness, or not the righteousness, but the the ability to say no and do the right thing. I guess that's pretty much the same answer you get out of just about every accountant, I think.
I like the word righteousness. Sounds very ethical.
So my example would be regarding the Fair FSLA, which is the Fair Labor Standard Act. Does anybody know what FSLA is? Heard it in any of your classes? Okay. So it's a pretty complex regulation. There's a lot of different ways that employers could violate this regulation, but one of the key things that kind of comes to mind for me that I continue to think about is back in 2013, I was working for a staffing agency. I was the branch manager. One of our largest clients, we had one person, one headcount managing this client. They were about, I'm guessing, probably about 300,000, 400,000 in revenue. And so we definitely didn't want to make them mad, that's for sure. We need to make sure that we kept them happy. And they were in a volatile market. They were in accounting and finance. And that is kind of a target market for, maybe because some of the things that they were just talking about, a target market for like wage and labor issues, or classifying people for if they're salary or non-exempt. So there's different duties tests and a salary test that you have to go through in order to classify somebody and pay them the correct wage. And they were not classifying their staff correctly, and we had several conversations with them to let them, and they were our employees. And so there was definitely risk for us to be employing those individuals knowing that the client was in violation of this regulation. And if you were to look on like lawsuits and things like that, it's one of the ones that's probably most aggressive and gone after is technology and in the finance and accounting industry. So we definitely knew that we were kind of opening ourselves to different situations or things like that. Thankfully, none of the employees did report any issues, or they didn't say, I know that I'm classified incorrectly, you should be paying me hourly, you need to do back pay me for all of my wages because I should really be paid hourly versus salary. So that was really a unique and complex situation because we had to kind of handle it with delicate hands to keep our client happy, but also let them know that, our best advice would be not to do this, and we need to make a change. And how do we make this change? Because to tell employees that you're going to go from making $45,000 to $50,000 a year, and now you're going to go down to an hourly wage, that can impact your culture, that can impact your morale. People think they're getting a demotion, when in fact they actually might make more money if they're granted overtime. So there was a lot of different change management components that we had to do that and make sure that everybody was reclassified coming on. And just to give you guys kind of an idea of how big of a deal FSLA is, I'm going to cheat and get my phone out here. But in 2016, FedEx, they had a settlement amount of $240 million. Their violation was unpaid overtime. Walmart and Sam's Club, they had $62.2 million off-the-clock work, missed meals, and rest and breaks, and unpaid overtime. Now, these are really big companies. Let's see if I can find another one that we might know. Bank of America, $14 million unpaid overtime. So unpaid overtime, that could be because somebody's not classified correctly.
Well, I'm guessing Walmart probably gets sued for that every year, but that's just, I'm very pro Walmart, very, as those in my class will discover soon. So I think, Dan, you kind of started as along this path as you were explaining how you shifted from, through your career, through all these various moves that you've made, it sounds like something was changing in you. And I think Dustin also kind of mentioned this. So I want you guys to go just a little bit deeper with how your values have influenced these career changes and career moves that you're making, and even how you've seen those values change as you've grown.
So, your values, and I think I probably share a lot in common with many of you. My values, I think, have actually become more stringent. I probably have become. I don't know that my values have changed. I think that I find them more useful. I think that I reflect on them a lot more. I think I think about them a lot more. I don't think that to say they've changed probably wouldn't. I think that they've become more narrow and become more self-assured about them. And that's.
Do you want to
really,
give us examples of some of your values?
So some of my value, I believe, deliver quality. I think that's it's a Midwestern value. It's something that we're all very useful or very used to hearing. I believe in delivering quality, and that's if you wanted me to answer the first question in 2 words, would be deliver quality. I think if you deliver quality, you get yourself a representation, you get yourself in the room, you get yourself a seat at the table. Delivering quality will always, it speaks to integrity, it speaks to trust, it speaks to all these major factors that drive ethics, and so deliver quality. That's it. It's that simple for me.
Mm-hmm.
I think I would echo a lot of that. Integrity, particularly, and service, and my values have become probably a little more narrow over time as well. I think, when I first got into the job market back in 2011, the recession was still on a little bit, and I was just looking to get food on the table. When you work in a commission-style job, what you're looking for is to just be able to eat next month, and you're frankly, you're pretty terrible at saving money as well. So once I was able to kind of get out of that mindset and take a step back and assess things, my values became a lot less ambiguous, and I think they really they drive me forward in the sense that I'm not always looking for a monetary benefit out of everything. It's doing what's right and waking up every day and just reiterating that.
Do you want us to shift now? Okay.
So we're going to do something a little different tonight.
All right. It's time for us to wrap up. So I'll ask our presenters to stand where they are and respond to this final question. What is the one piece of advice you want to leave these students with?
So I am going to use what I used last time and found out afterwards that there's a movie tied to this. But I would just say be curious and ask why. It can be used in a lot of different ways, especially surrounding ethics. We were just talking about like speaking up and with sexual harassment and lots of different things. But if you're curious and you ask why, sometimes it's going to lead you to something that may be ethical, and maybe that's when you need to make a decision on how it impacts your true values.
I like to stay curious. I think the world around you, what is the Steve Jobs quote, that the world around you is built and put into place by people who are no more intelligent than you are, and that's absolutely a fact. So stay curious, deliver quality. That's about it. And play your game, right? Just go after what you want, not what somebody else's version of that is.
I would just say be transparent and have integrity. Be transparent in your motivation with your coworkers, with everyone else. and then just have integrity, feel good about what you do.
All right, that sounds like a really good place to stop for today. Thank you, students, for showing up and engaging. Thank you, Dan and Dustin and Brenda, for leaving what you normally would be doing and coming to hang out with us. We do not take it for granted. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, Leanne, for organizing this. I don't think they're running out, so feel free to come and engage with them one-on-one if you've got some other things you'd like to talk to them about. Thank you.